Nitaconfirm meeting after nimesort hiyo issue. See what I just did there? That sentence is very English heavy. And even though it sounded like Swahili, it is a bit of mixture because most Kenyans are taught in school that English comes first. But Suleiman, what do you think?
In Tanzania, Kiswahili comes first, then English, because this starts in the school system. Almost every Tanzanian speaks Kiswahili, but not everyone speaks English.
Welcome to the show. My name is Rachel Nduati.
And I'm Suleiman Mweru.
So, every time, guys, I interact with Suleiman, I feel a bit intimidated by the measure of Kiswahili that this guy speaks. Like, this guy is really, really fluent in Kiswahili. And to me, this is a bit of a, a tough one because when I grew up in school, the very first language of instruction that I actually learned was English. I learned A for apple, B for boy, not A for achana na yeye or B for,
Baba.
Exactly. So, like, for me, like, this is really a tough situation. Even as a Kenyan, sometimes we do struggle with speaking Kiswahili.
This is because also we have a different background. Because for me, Kiswahili was the first language for me to go. I went to primary school. The day one in primary school, we started using Kiswahili as our medium of instruction, and then later on to the second school, then English. So that's the difference between me and you.
And sometimes when we're interacting, I'm always stealing some of Suleiman's words. Nowadays, I'm even saying tafadhali.
Yeah.
But why do Kenyans opt for English? The reason why Kenyans really opt for English is because English in itself poses a very huge opportunity for them. We have like one of the biggest language speakers. We're actually number 2 in Africa and we're number 1 in East Africa. So you can imagine, like, we just want to be, the people who speak good English, but when it comes to speaking Kiswahili, like when I speak with you, I'm like, it
is also fair to say Tanzania is the number 1 in East Africa speaking Kiswahili. That's the reason why you're saying
I feel bad when you're saying that. But it's true. It's true.
Yeah, because I think since 1960s, Kiswahili was already a language that unites more than 120 tribes in Tanzania. If you do remember well, after the independence of Tanzania, Tanganyika by the time, Tanzania chose to opt for the Ujamaa policy, which our former president said,
Julius Nyerere.
We have 120 tribes, and then we have to find a language that will unite all of us. Yes. So Kiswahili was championed.
But we also have 44 tribes.
And then Kiswahili is also one of the national languages in your country.
But I don't know. But sometimes, students also have a problem with navigating education if the language of instruction used switches later in their lives, So let's hear from Imani, who spoke to students in Tanzania.
Hi Rachel and Suleiman. I'm here at University of Dar es Salaam, one of the Tanzania's largest and most prestigious university, to ask students a simple but important question. Which language would they prefer as the language of instruction in higher education, Kiswahili or English, and why?
Kiswahili for me because I'm Tanzanian, and one of the identity of my country and my culture is Swahili language. And where we are, we like to use Swahili language because we can understand things simply.
English is paramount because they are preparing us to live in an international world. We need English. But I would say at earlier stages of instruction, like as young as nursery, and then especially primary and secondary, those formative years, I think, the best strategy for where we are as a country economically would be to try the method that Kenya is doing right now, which is that they instruct children to be fluent in both English and Kiswahili.
Kiswahili language is our culture and is a symbol for unity. So since childhood, we used to speak Kiswahili and we are so fluent in Kiswahili. So just imagine a child is just learning Kiswahili as the primary language. Then at secondary school, we just want to convert from Kiswahili language to English language. That can be some confusions to start to learn a new language. Sometimes students may not be able to express their ideas and innovation because of language.
Yeah, for sure. Some people cannot be able to express themselves because they have always, used Kiswahili as the default, and we can clearly see there in that report.
That's what you can call like the abrupt education shift. That you've been spending like 70 years. In Tanzania, we have like 7 years of primary school and then 4 years of lower secondary school. So for the first 7 years, you are using Kiswahili, and then boom. It's like you're studying
you're fed into the world to start learning English.
In a new world,
But I think it's very interesting because, for example, in Kenya, we speak very good English, but sometimes like Kiswahili was always taught as a subject, the way that you guys English was taught as a subject. So it's like reverse, and this led to a lot of self-esteem for people also, because we had debaters club where people used to do debates in Kiswahili, but no one really understood how to articulate themselves fully because they can't speak Kiswahili, they speak English.
So from what happened to me, you can see some of us didn't make it in, in your first year, you were struggling to understand English words, and then in your second year, then you're trying to catch up the trend, but not everybody makes it to that level, and that gives another person, if they can't make it, then it gives them like lower self-esteem, and then they start feeling like, okay, what am I doing here? Then
you do question.
Schools becomes tough for them, and then if they don't have this motivation, some people drop out of the school.
Wow, crazy. But also, Kenyans also get more opportunities, especially when it comes to international opportunities, because they clearly speak very good English. And these opportunities do not exist when it comes to like Kiswahili. And sometimes people have tried to measure this as a form of intelligence, like speaking English as a form of intelligence. But is this really the case?
In Tanzania, it's contrary, but there is a lot of circulation when it talks about English and Kiswahili, but most of the people in Tanzania prefer to speak Kiswahili. But is English really a measure of intelligence? Let's hear it from the street debate.
Tanzania, when you speak English, it's when people look at you like you are intelligent. And when you speak Swahili, or when you can't speak English, they will look at you like, Mjinga. How is Mjinga in English?
Foolish.
Foolish. Like you're a fool because you don't know English. So it's really, I don't really get it, because we take speaking English as being intelligent.
I've read that teachers are sometimes horrible to students who don't speak Swahili, who employ fear and shame as a tool to try and encourage them to learn. Is this true?
It is. You see, what happens is, as my friend said here, that English is being termed as the measure of intelligence, you see? And not speaking English, you seem like you're unuseful, okay? And that becomes a very big problem. It discourages the learners, okay? And my advice to the government, I think, since they decided to have these two sections, that we have the public schools and private schools, I think we should also continue like that on the secondary level, because that will give an option to the children who started with the Swahili language to keep on using it, and perhaps they will do it better.
That debate was very interesting because it shows that what we've all known, it has confirmed what we've always known, that, Africans still think that English is a measure of intelligence, but this is not the case.
For sure. In Tanzania, for example, only 5% of the total population speaks English fluently. Only 5%. This is according to government reports.
But coming back to the whole speaking English in school, I mean, obviously you mentioned earlier as well that people do get punished.
For sure.
Severely for speaking, their native languages, not only Swahili, but also like other languages. So were you ever punished for speaking Swahili in school? I know that I was. Were you, Suleiman?
Of course, that's really, let's see in the second part of our street debate.
In secondary, I remember when we were at school, there was a rule to speak English. And if you don't speak English throughout the day, there are punishments and everything. So no more punishment like, viboko, sticks. A couple sticks. You get a couple sticks, punishments here and there. So we had really to cope using English, to try not to speak Swahili at all for a whole day, from morning till evening. Maybe later on in the bweni, in the dormitory, that's where you speak Swahili a little.
So if you want to watch the full version or the long version of that debate, please go to YouTube and follow us on TikTok or on Instagram. We have got you covered. Now, many of us have heard the saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. Corporal punishment remains common across sub-Saharan Africa, with about 71% of children experiencing it at home. And research has shown how the widespread use of corporal punishment is frequently attributed to African tradition. But in reality, can this be traced to colonial roots? Yes.
In some countries, almost every student reports being physically punished by school staff. Let's join our colleague Julius in Uganda to find out more about corporal punishment.
This is Jeremiah. He is 4 years old. Last year, a teacher beat him so badly. The mother says he lost half his hearing.
The doctor found signs of physical trauma, suggesting that he was lightly beaten on the sides of the head, as the medical examination also revealed swellings consistent with beatings.
But the scars go beyond his ears. Jeremiah now fears everything about school. His mother's been forced to homeschool him. But even at home, Jeremiah fears making mistakes.
Every time you mention school, he panics and fears he'll be beaten again, sometimes shouting that he's done with school.
Educationists insist that learning and violence should never mix.
It damages the self-esteem of the child, and that's not a good thing. They will hate the subject. They will blame it themselves. For example, if you're beating them for not passing a subject, they will hate the subject. They will hate you as the teacher. They will not say it, but they will hate you. They will feel embarrassed among their fellow students, and they will expect it. They will normalize it.
In Uganda, corporal punishment in schools is banned by law. Yet studies show that nearly 70% of schools still use it as a form of discipline. Many cases go unreported, sometimes even encouraged by parents. Videos of children being beaten often circulate on social media. Advocates now warn of a deeper risk.
Many of those children who have gone through trauma, corporal punishment, are traumatized. And even when they grow old, the only thing they'll know how to do is to inflict trauma on the next generation. So it is just passing on trauma from one generation to another generation.
Activists warn that many more will suffer or even die if society does not abandon a violent mindset.
Yes, these reports remind me of what happened to me.
I was looking at you and you were just shaking your head like this.
Yes, it reminded me a lot of me when I was at school. And not only me, all of my friends, even in primary school and secondary school, we used to be punished like this. You have seen the video, somebody was just laying down there and teachers weeping him like, wah, wah. You know, it's not funny, but again, it happened to a lot of us. And then I remember I was late, like 5 minutes from school, and then the teacher was waiting me in the corner, and he said, "Hey, Suleiman, you're late, so you have to go down there." And then he started beating me with my hands, using the hands, and I was like, it reached a point where I was like, you know, I'm used to the sticks. You know, every time he say like, okay, I give him like the hand, okay, punish me as much as you want. I'm getting emotional, but it reminded me a lot of moments when we used to be at school. And it is something that it made me like hate even the teacher, even to go to school. Sometime when I'm late, I would rather find a reason to like, okay, I'm sick today.
And you know, there's two types of people, as you said. There's the child who will try to gaslight the teacher and be like, yeah, beat me now, I do not even care. Yeah. And then there's the other child who will store that deep inside and it later manifests itself during adulthood. And I think that's even a bigger conversation that has to be done. And I was even looking at research like on the number of people like who die or the number of children who die, and I couldn't find any numbers because there are a lot of institutional cover-ups in schools. Students don't want to report these things because they're also like frustrated and they don't want to like do all of these things. And so it's really a tough situation for students, and African teachers sort of have to come to the table and understand that sometimes sparing the road does not mean like it's going to, you know, make the child really learn anything, to be honest. And you have this even when it comes to languages, for example, because I remember in Kenya, people were punished for speaking Kikuyu. People were punished for speaking Tolo. You're told you either speak English and that's it. And that is a problem. So, you know, and it manifests itself in these ways. Now, you can imagine for a country like, for example, Nigeria, that has over 520 indigenous languages, you know, making it the most linguistically diverse country in the world. That creates a problem where people grow up speaking English. Let's go to Nigeria now, where Favor explains to us the complexities of language learning in Nigeria.
Think back to your school days. How many subjects did you learn in your native language? Probably not many. For most people across Africa, lessons are taught in English, French, or Portuguese. In fact, some students spend more time learning those languages than learning to read and write their own. And that's a bit strange when you think about it, because long before colonialism, Africans were already educating their children through storytelling, apprenticeships, religion, community life, and local languages. Then, colonial governments introduced a different school system closer to today's classrooms. After independence, much of it remained. The building stayed, the curriculum, but in many places, the language of instruction did not. And decades later, we're still debating whether that was the right choice. Take Nigeria, for example. Education experts have long argued that children learn best in a language they already understand. That's why Nigeria introduced mother tongue policies in early education. But in a country with hundreds of languages, implementation wasn't easy. Many parents still preferred English, and eventually the government returned to English as the main teaching language. And Nigeria isn't the only country trying to figure this out. Across Africa, countries have experimented with different approaches. Some start with local languages before transitioning to English or French. Others introduce international languages much earlier. But the reality is that many of the opportunities available later in life still depend on English, French, or Portuguese. So African education systems find themselves caught in the middle. Teach children the language they know best, or teach them in the language they will likely need most. And maybe that's why this debate has lasted for so long, because it's not really a debate about language. It's a debate about what schools are supposed to prepare young people for.
You know, sometimes policymakers don't really even involve students in these conversations because you find that, African teachers know.
Yes.
Like they come into this situation, we know, you do not know. So this is the language that you're going to have to learn.
And there is this thing that I don't know, you can also give me like your perspective.
Yeah.
Like teachers or professors, they believe that they own the education.
Hey.
It's like you don't have anything that you know. You can't even challenge them, you know?
You can't ask an African teacher anything.
We have the internet. A lot of information just there. So some of the things maybe you have the idea that you want to question the teacher, but the fearness is too huge to the point that you can't even ask the teacher because of this is something that's been there for
sure,
for years.
Yeah, for sure. And we need this balance, where teachers come into the situation.
You have to be like some sort of my friend. Like I'm comfortable.
But this doesn't happen in an African classroom.
Yeah, but when you see the teacher, you are about to go. You know that it's about to go down. So I'm gonna run. It's a problem. But on the other side of the world, teachers are the people that you can really go and ask, like, okay, this is how I feel.
Sure.
This is how I want to, somebody who you can
creates
really...
that safe haven,
Yes, there is no
safe
zone for them.
Yeah, so I think we just have similar experiences, just in different languages. Yeah. So while the law in Nigeria is bringing English as the language of instruction and is being implemented, a teacher in northern Nigeria is choosing defiance and using different teachings to ensure that students are not left behind.
In Kano State, millions of students walk into school carrying one language from home and meeting another one inside the classroom. In this episode of My Hustle, I will be experiencing what it takes to be a classroom teacher.
My name is Safia Muhammad Magana, live from N2's Entrepreneurship Secondary School, and this is My Hustle.
For teachers like Safiat Muhammad, language is not just about communication. It can decide whether students understand a lesson or completely lose interest.
The father provides food, shelter, health, okay? All of these things. Duk tarbiyya duk uba da uwa duk suke ba da tarbiyyan yara. Ba uwa kawai take ba da tarbiyya ba.
Immediately, you can see the difference. The students become more relaxed, confident, and more involved.
Sometimes when you speak in English, they will still ask you to translate it in the language they understand.
And do you see that as a challenge?
It's not. Even though some schools would not want you to use indigenous languages, they will strictly want you to be in English. But to me, I would prefer to, anytime I'm teaching, I would love to give insights or give examples with language.
And here in Kano State, the contrast is impossible to ignore. Outside the classroom, Hausa dominates almost every conversation. Markets run in Hausa, Transport workers negotiate in Hausa. Families communicate in Hausa.
But we understand it for the local setting rather than the formal setting. Since when we were in nursery school, we used to speak English. So we understand English more to this kind of a setting, this formal setting, this school setting. But the problem here is you can respond to your friends in Hausa while you can't respond to what your teacher is saying in Hausa. Why? Because you're familiar to English.
For many students here in Kano State, this is not just an academic debate. It is their daily reality and perhaps the future of African education. My name is Samson Adeleke. Keep following DW, the 77%.
Yeah, I love Samsung energy. But Suleiman, you said that you have been speaking Kiswahili before, but from like secondary school.
Yes,
what if they
now
continued speaking Kiswahili and like you learned everything in Kiswahili? What would have been different?
A lot of things, because at the moment, take an example as the Bible, for example. Bible is translated into millions of languages and everybody's just knowing the same word of God. So I think even for me, if I used Kiswahili from scratch, things could have been better. They are better at the moment, but again, I had to go deeper to try to learn another language so that I can survive out here.
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. Like a lot would have been different because I remember when I was learning, for example, the scientific word for a lion, right? So this
Simba
is
in Kiswahili.
This is Simba in Kiswahili. The Latin name is Panthera, but I do not know what it's called. I had to Google it today to know what a lion is called in Kikuyu, which is my native language. So I think this could have changed a lot of things for me. And, you know, sometimes the system makes it very, very difficult for us to, you know, understand how languages can adapt. For example, even when it comes to technology, because now we're using technology.
The world is changing with tech. Can tech help preserve our languages? Let's now look at Mali, where our children are incorporating artificial intelligence with Bambara, a local language in Mali.
These students in Bamako have been able to read and write for a while now, but today is the first time they are doing it in their mother tongue.
This is the first time. It's good. It helps me speak better with my friends. At school, we only speak French. It's a shame. Bambara is our language and should be prioritized, but it isn't. We speak Bambara in the streets every day, so learning Bambara is important.
The Robots Mali organization has already developed more than 100 stories in local languages, from well-known Malian folk tales to contemporary stories, for example, about war in the country. Since the stories are also illustrated, it teaches them to make the connections between words and their meaning very quickly. They also hope the books will combat illiteracy among Bambara speakers. There is help from writers and language experts, as well as artificial intelligence. You first have to formulate clearly what you want to say and think about a prompt you are going to write. AI programs are used to write, translate, and illustrate the stories. It makes me proud to see my little brothers and sisters learning with so much joy. The hope is that Bambara and other local languages will slowly but surely get their well-deserved place.
Language matters to teaching, Rachel.
Indeed, it really does. And I was really super proud to see, you know, the local native language that was being used in artificial intelligence. Because can you imagine like just using ChatGPT and speaking your Nyatoro or Kiswahili, I speaking Kikuyu. You know, these are the solutions that we need, solutions that help people at the local level as well as the international one. And I think that people also have to, you know, invest in electricity, you know, invest in infrastructure and make sure that the education reaches a point where it suits the needs of the students, because if we don't change the system now, no one will. And we have to also come back to the children and hear from them. So let's hear from Abigail, who went to a 7-day camp where young people are trained to become responsible parts of the community.
Hello, Mr. Lumu.
Hello, Abigail.
I would like to know, why did you find it so important to organize such a gathering for boys and girls?
We bring responsible people, real parents, to talk to these boys, to give them guidance and counseling.
What did they teach you? We've been taught a lot by many different people, important people. For example, Major Dismas from the army told us a story of how he lacked emotional intelligence at a time that his brother was being bullied and he had a stick in his hand. So the first thing to come in his mind due to his anger was to hit the bully. But on hitting, he caused the bully to have a nosebleed, and that can actually affect a person, even permanently. We got told a lot, but the thing I remember most was from one of the parents who told us that you will always be enough, and that's something I'm going to live by for the rest of my life.
That is so, so charming.
Yes.
But anyway, guys, we have to end this show and we do want to hear from your experiences. But before that, Suleiman, you also have something for us to share.
Yeah. And if you're hungry for some more real talk about Africa's biggest issues, listen to the Under the Baobab, DW's weekly podcast by Mimi Mefo and Jojo Kachi, pressing topics explained by experts and everyday changemakers from Africa. Until next time, kwaheri, lakini.
Yeah, but it's not kwaheri because you're still coming back, right?
Yes, I'm going to be back. I'm giving a hand. Asante sana.
Karibu sana. Next time, maybe next time I will speak more Kiswahili.
You're already good.